The brain's reward system. Why new is always better. Dopamine, the novelty catalyst. Dopamine doesn't care whether your new obsession is worthwhile. When you stumble across pottery videos at 11 p.m. and suddenly know you were meant to throw clay, your brain releases the same neurochemical reward it would if you'd discovered fresh water in a desert. This isn't metaphorical. The mesolimbic pathway, your brain's reward circuitry, treats novelty as inherently valuable because for most of human history, new meant survival advantage. A new berry bush, a new hunting ground, a new tool technique. These discoveries kept our ancestors fed. Your brain hasn't caught up to the fact that discovering macrame tutorials offers no caloric benefit. The dopamine spike arrives not when you master something, but when you anticipate mastering it. This explains why researching guitars feels more thrilling than practicing scales, why watching YouTube videos about running ignites more excitement than actually running. The neurochemical payoff concentrates in the possibility phase, not the execution phase. You're chemically rewarded for imagining yourself as a guitarist, then biochemically abandoned when faced with barre chords and calloused fingertips. In the initial phase of a new interest, your brain floods you with motivation you didn't earn and can't sustain. This isn't a character flaw. The ventral tegmental area releases dopamine in response to unpredictability and newness, creating what researchers call incentive salience, the quality that makes something feel worth pursuing. But this system evolved for environments where novelty was rare and valuable, not for modern life, where a single evening online can introduce you to 17 potential life-changing hobbies. Berridge and Robinson, 2018. Robinson and Berridge, 2008. Morday, 2020. The cruelest part. Your brain experiences researching a new interest as productivity, as movement toward a goal, delivering all the chemical satisfaction of actual progress, while requiring none of the effort. The allure of the unknown. Uncertainty fires up your brain in ways predictability never could. When you pick up watercolors for the first time, every brush stroke contains a question. Will this blend? Will that wash create the effect I imagine? This state of productive uncertainty activates multiple neural networks simultaneously. The prefrontal cortex evaluating possibilities, the anterior cingulate cortex monitoring for prediction errors, the dopaminergic system amplifying attention toward outcomes you can't yet predict. The brain treats the unknown as informationally rich, worthy of resources and focus. Familiar activities offer few surprises. Your Wednesday morning commute, your established workout routine, even hobbies you've practiced for years. These generate minimal dopamine because your brain already knows what happens next. The neurological term is prediction error, the gap between what you expect and what occurs. Large prediction errors trigger dopamine release. Zero prediction errors trigger nothing. This explains why scrolling through new subreddits feels more compelling than rereading your favorite book. Why researching digital nomad lifestyles at 2 a.m. seems urgent while your actual job feels numbing. Novelty doesn't just feel good. It temporarily makes you smarter, more attentive, more capable. Research indicates that exposure to novel stimuli enhances memory consolidation and increases neuroplasticity, making the brain more adaptable to new experiences. Your brain literally works better when challenged by the unfamiliar, which means that initial week with a new hobby isn't delusional. You genuinely are more engaged, more creative, more energized. The problem isn't that you imagine those qualities. The problem is assuming they'll persist once the novelty evaporates. This creates a devastating cycle. You chase new interests because they genuinely deliver cognitive and emotional benefits that established pursuits no longer provide. But those benefits are novelty-dependent, not interest-dependent. They'll vanish from pottery as surely as they vanished from guitar, photography, and that meditation practice you swore would stick. You're not collecting hobbies. You're collecting diminishing returns. Short-lived satisfaction. The reward paradox. Recognition changes nothing without stakes, and the stakes here cut deeper than wasted guitar lessons. Every abandoned interest represents opportunity cost, not just the money spent on equipment gathering dust, but the relationships you might have built, the skills you could have compounded, the identity you never developed because you kept restarting at beginner level. The principles of deliberate practice, as extensively researched by K. Anders Ericsson, highlight that individuals who maintain focused engagement on a single pursuit over extended periods achieve significantly higher skill levels compared to those who frequently switch activities, even when total investment hours are similar. Ericsson, 1993. Mastery requires pushing past the novelty phase into what researchers call the competence plateau, where progress slows but depth accumulates. You never get there if you keep jumping ship. The pattern also corrodes self-trust. Each time you abandon an interest, you reinforce a narrative. I'm someone who doesn't follow through. This isn't motivational rhetoric, it's cognitive reinforcement. Your brain catalogs these experiences as evidence, making future commitments feel less credible even as you make them. The enthusiasm you feel signing up for that pottery class already contains an undertone of doubt, a whispered, "But will I actually stick with this?" That doubt isn't wrong. It's pattern recognition. Meanwhile, the world rewards specialists. The photographer who spent 10 years developing a distinctive style builds a career. The person who dabbled in photography, videography, and illustration before moving on to podcasting builds a resume of incomplete narratives. This matters professionally, but it matters personally too. Depth of knowledge creates opportunities for connection that breadth never does. The neurological paradox operates silently. Your reward system evolved to pursue novelty because exploration conferred survival advantages, but it can't distinguish between productive exploration and compulsive switching. From your brain's perspective, researching hydroponic gardening at midnight generates the same dopamine hit as actually tending plants would, but only one builds skill. You're feeding an appetite that will never produce satiation. Understanding this mechanism doesn't shame you into consistency, but it does illuminate why repeated cycles of excitement and abandonment leave you feeling hollowed out rather than enriched, competent at beginning, but never at mastering. The role of expectations. When reality strikes. The expectation illusion. When you signed up for that ceramics class, you didn't expect to become a struggling ceramicist. You expected to become someone who makes beautiful bowls while experiencing meditative calm, probably wearing linen, definitely not covered in clay dust and frustration. Expectations operate less like predictions and more like fantasy casting. You're auditioning for a role in a life you've never actually lived. Most new interests arrive prepackaged with an entire lifestyle attached. Learning Spanish doesn't just mean memorizing conjugations. It means imagining yourself conversing effortlessly at Barcelona cafes, your future self somehow possessing both fluency and the discretionary income for European holidays. The guitar comes bundled with visions of casual jam sessions, not calloused fingertips, and the humiliating reality that Wonderwall is genuinely difficult. Social media feeds amplify this distortion, showcasing only the polished end results while conveniently editing out the messy middle where most people actually quit. This distortion intensifies because initial research feels like progress. Watching YouTube tutorials about bread fermentation delivers the satisfaction of learning without the tedium of kneading. Reading about marathon training produces the same dopamine hit as actually running, minus the shin splints. Your brain rewards you for imagining competence as generously as it rewards actual competence. So you arrive at week 1 already convinced you understand what you're undertaking. This phenomenon creates a false sense of mastery before you've even started, setting the stage for profound disappointment when reality inevitably intrudes. Those inflated expectations aren't just unrealistic. They're specifically designed to exclude difficulty. You envision yourself playing piano, not drilling scales for 40 minutes. You imagine speaking French, not stumbling through verb tenses while a Duolingo owl judges you. The fantasy edits out everything that makes the pursuit actually difficult, which means your expectations are structurally incapable of surviving contact with reality. When the gap appears between what you imagined and what you're experiencing, it doesn't feel like normal learning frustration. It feels like failure, like you've somehow ended up doing this wrong. The expectation illusion operates silently in the background, creating a setup where disappointment isn't just likely, but inevitable. You researched the destination and skipped the journey, then wondered why the actual path feels nothing like what you signed up for. Reality check. Facing the gap. The moment your yoga practice turns out to require actual core strength, or your woodworking project demands more than enthusiasm and a trip to Home Depot, something shifts. That gleaming vision you had, effortless flexibility, or handcrafted bookshelves gracing your living room, collides with the stubborn reality of sore muscles and splintered pine. This is the expectation-reality gap, and it's where motivation often takes its first serious hit. The psychological impact of this collision can feel surprisingly personal. You might experience disappointment, sure, but also a creeping sense of inadequacy. Why is this so much harder than I thought? Am I just not cut out for this? These questions aren't just about the activity itself. They're about your identity and capabilities. The disillusionment phase brings with it frustration, self-doubt, and sometimes a defensive urge to abandon ship before anyone notices you're struggling. It's the emotional equivalent of discovering your dream vacation spot has terrible Wi-Fi and aggressive seagulls. Here's the thing. This gap isn't a design flaw in your personality. It's a predictable feature of how humans approach new ventures. We tend to overestimate how quickly we'll progress and underestimate the mundane, repetitive effort required. We imagine the highlight reel, not the hours of tedious practice. Bridging this gap starts with recalibrating your expectations in real time. When you notice that frustration bubbling up, pause and ask yourself what you actually expected versus what's unfolding. Sometimes, just naming the gap out loud, I thought I'd be playing songs by now, but I'm still wrestling with chord changes, takes away some of its sting. Acknowledgement is surprisingly powerful. Next, cultivate flexibility. Instead of clinging to your original timeline or outcome, give yourself permission to adjust. Maybe your goal shifts from master the guitar to enjoy playing 3 songs reasonably well. That's not lowering standards, it's embracing a resilient mindset that values progress over perfection. The objective isn't to eliminate disappointment entirely, but to prevent it from becoming the story you tell yourself about your abilities. Keep showing up, keep adjusting, and let the gap teach you something about patience. And maybe yourself. From investment to maintenance. The shift that changes everything. The investment illusion. The investment phase seduces us with a particular type of optimism that feels productive but rarely survives contact with reality. It's that electric moment when you're researching pottery wheels at midnight, certain you've finally found the thing that will transform your Tuesday evenings into something meaningful. Your credit card sits ready. Your imagination runs wild with visions of beautiful bowls accumulating on your shelves, dinner parties where guests marvel at your craftsmanship, perhaps even a small Etsy shop by next Christmas. What you're not imagining: the 14th Tuesday when your hands ache, the clay stubbornly refuses to center, and you realize you've spent 90 minutes creating something that resembles a dented ashtray more than a bowl. This selective imagination isn't a character flaw. It's how the brain protects excitement from inconvenient truths. The investment phase operates on highlight reels and aspirational identities, conveniently editing out the unglamorous maintenance work that actually sustains any interest beyond the first enthusiastic month. We envision ourselves as the person who plays cello, not the person who spends 20 minutes rosening bows and tuning strings before playing a single note. We imagine the yoga pose, not the slightly boring drive to class. We picture the finished novel, not the third revision of Chapter 2 that still isn't working. The crash comes when these edited-out realities accumulate into an unavoidable truth. Sustaining any interest requires embracing its tedious maintenance tasks. The excitement that funded your initial investment doesn't automatically transfer to the decidedly unsexy work of showing up when novelty fades. That's when inflated expectations meet ordinary Tuesdays, and disillusionment moves in without asking permission. The plateau effect. Recognizing the shift from investment to maintenance doesn't require therapy. It requires a framework you can actually use when motivation starts its predictable slide. What follows isn't theory. It's the operational checklist I developed after watching too many talented people abandon projects right before competence would have kicked in. Track your enthusiasm honestly. Not what you think you should feel, but what you actually experience when facing your new interest on an ordinary Wednesday. If dread outweighs curiosity 3 sessions in a row, that's data worth examining. If mild reluctance gives way to engagement once you start, that's different data entirely. Distinguish between novelty fatigue and genuine misalignment. Novelty fatigue feels like boredom with fundamentals. You're tired of practicing scales, but still interested in music. Misalignment feels like resistance to the activity itself. One requires pushing through. The other requires honest reassessment. Deliberately shrink your commitment. When motivation dips, most people either white-knuckle through original plans or quit entirely. Neither works. Instead, compress. If you practiced guitar an hour daily, drop to 15 focused minutes. If you attended 3 yoga classes weekly, commit to 1. This isn't surrender. It's building a sustainable maintenance baseline that preserves progress without demanding unsustainable enthusiasm. Many interests survive on surprisingly modest ongoing investment once you've established basic competence. Schedule maintenance tasks explicitly. The unglamorous work, tuning, cleaning brushes, organizing materials, doesn't happen through willpower. It happens through integration into predictable routines, preferably bundled with activities you already do consistently. Finally, permission. Not everything that sparks interest deserves permanent space in your life. Some explorations teach you exactly what you needed to know before naturally concluding. Maintenance mindset, from excitement to routine. The transition from investment to maintenance sneaks up on most of us. One day you're thrilled to be assembling your new easel, imagining the masterpieces you'll create, and the next, you're staring at a half-finished canvas, wondering why you ever thought painting was relaxing. The psychological shift happens so gradually that you barely notice until the dread has already set in. This isn't about willpower or discipline. It's about how your brain processes novelty versus familiarity. During the investment phase, everything feels significant. Choosing brushes, learning color theory, watching your first blended gradient emerge. Each small discovery triggers a dopamine response, reinforcing your engagement. But once you've learned the basics, once you know how to mix paint and stretch canvas, your brain stops rewarding you for simply showing up. The thrill of discovery gives way to the reality of repetition, and suddenly, that exciting new hobby feels suspiciously like work. The maintenance phase demands a different kind of engagement altogether. Rather than the explosive energy of beginning, maintenance requires steady, consistent effort without the constant dopamine hits. You're no longer learning what to do. You're learning to do it well, which involves practicing the same techniques repeatedly until they become second nature. For many people, this is precisely where interest flatlines. The brain, accustomed to the excitement of constant novelty, finds little reward in refinement and repetition. Understanding this psychological reality doesn't make it disappear, but it does remove the unnecessary layer of self-judgment that often accompanies the fade. Sustaining momentum. Strategies for the long haul. Expecting yourself to maintain beginner-level enthusiasm throughout the maintenance phase is like expecting birthday cake to taste thrilling for breakfast every day. It won't, and that's not a character defect. Progress over perfection isn't just a motivational platitude. It's a survival strategy for this exact phase, when the shine has worn off, but the skill hasn't yet become automatic. Small actions compound more reliably than grand gestures. Practicing guitar for 12 minutes daily builds calluses and muscle memory. Blocking off serious practice time on weekends creates pressure and avoidance. The trick isn't finding more motivation, it's reducing the activation energy required to begin. Leave your running shoes by the door. Keep your sketchbook on the coffee table, not filed away in a drawer. Make starting so frictionless that you're halfway through before your brain registers an opportunity to negotiate. Most people abandon hobbies not during obvious failure, but during invisible fade. The weeks when "I'll get back to it tomorrow" becomes a default setting. Addressing this requires uncomfortable honesty about what's actually blocking you. Sometimes it's legitimate time constraints. More often it's fear of mediocrity masquerading as busy schedules. Perfectionism leads individuals to abandon projects when early results fail to match an imagined, expert-level craftsmanship, mistakenly expecting advanced outcomes in the initial stages of practice. Boys, 2023. The maintenance phase demands tolerating your own current skill level long enough to improve it, which feels counterintuitively harder than starting fresh with something new. Burnout prevention isn't about working less. It's about working within sustainable rhythms that acknowledge your actual life, not your fantasy capacity. 20 minutes of daily practice beats weekend binges, followed by guilty silence. Permission to be mediocre today creates space to be competent eventually. The goal isn't maintaining peak enthusiasm forever. It's building a relationship with the hobby that survives ordinary Wednesdays when nothing feels particularly inspiring.